So hello, you just went through Karen's video on journey mapping, and what I'm going to try to do is take you through the examples we used on Nature's Own to develop the bread journey. And a couple of things to think about. One is journeys are going to be different for every category, and I think Karen touched on this. My prior life working on the candy industry, one of the big journeys you had was people buying on the front end on impulse. Kind of basically you get worn down by the shopping experience and you need to treat yourself. And that is the journey for buying impulse candy in a grocery store. The bread journey is very different. The other thing you're going to see is we try to utilize multiple methods. And this is because if I ask you what you did last week or why you did it, you probably don't know. So just relying on one method won't get the answer done. So I'm going to go and share my screen and quickly take you through the journey that we actually used on Nature's Own. Okay, as I mentioned, we tried to get through multiple methods to come up with the journey versus relying on just one thing. So an online diary that gets in the moment. So you're not having to recall what you did last week like you may with a traditional survey. We use a lot of social media and understanding what people are saying about the journey there. Obviously, quantitative testing is part of the journey. The other thing is we relied on a company called IRI. And for those in the food space, what IRI does is they take all the data that goes through the checkout. So they actually know they're sending the survey to people who really purchase bread and or really purchase Nature's Own versus said they did in a screener for a survey. So by utilizing IRI, we're actually able to do it amongst what they call their household panel, but send the survey to people who we know 100% actually bought the products we're going to be talking about. So the other thing I'll point out before we show the map is for bread, about half of the buyers go into the store with a shopping list with bread and brand on the shopping list. The other half go in there not knowing what brand they're going to buy. And from a marketing perspective, our number one goal is to get more people making that brand decision before going in the store versus at the store where they can be influenced by what do I see, who has the most facings, who's on a bigger discount that week, and making the decision based on price. The other thing is, and this really accelerated over COVID, but buying groceries online, e-commerce, having a decision before you shop is very important, because if I just type in bread, the outcome that's delivered to the consumers is really controlled by the retailer, by Instacart, by the Amazons, versus if I can get you to type in Dave's Killer Bread, Wonder Bread, Nature's Own, I'm taking control of your choice. I'm not putting it in the hands of the influencer. So multiple moments of truth during the bread journey. So the first one is, I'm writing my shopping list. I'm planning my meals for next week. Or I made a sandwich for my family, and I just used up that last slice. So that first moment of truth happens well before you go into the store, but it's all really about either using or thinking about that end result of what I use bread for. It's either going to be toast or sandwich. And then the consideration set. My consideration set, if I'm making burgers, it's hamburger buns and maybe a different set of bread brands than it is if I'm looking at for toast or for sandwiches. And what I want for each of those is different. Kind of the second moment of truth is kind of the need state I'm thinking about. So am I thinking about something that everyone in the family is going to like and I feel good giving them? Again, family nutrition, that's the bullseye for Nature's Own. If I'm concerned about my body image, we're seeing a lot of keto-friendly breads coming out now, because we know a lot of people are on more of a high protein, low carb, not good for the bread industry. So there's a bit of that. This study was actually done to understand what we can do differently during COVID. And so we know COVID, you had a whole separate, issue going on, and that's out of stocks. We tended not to be out of stock. So our number one goal, if you walk into a store, is one, be in stock so it's easier to buy our brands? And then two, how do we keep those people that tried us because maybe the brands they normally buy were out of stock? And then that third moment of truth is what happens on shelf. And multiple elements go into that. If you ask consumers, the number one thing they're going to say is, well, what's the prices? But the reality is, and this is where the journey comes in. It's more than just the price. It's the brand. How quickly do I notice the brand on shelf? And then one of the things unique to bread is, and you'll never get this out of a survey, you have to have a in-store component. But if you watch people purchase bread, they tend to reach out, they squeeze it. That's reassuring them that they're buying the freshest, the softest bread possible. And then finally, and you see this in milk and all the time, we have an expiration date. So a lot of people buy what's in front of them, but others reach to the back. They want to buy the one with the longest expiration date. They think they're getting the freshest bread, the bread that's going to last longer. So that third moment of truth is very different than many other categories and has to be understood from a bread perspective and not just a how do consumers shop a grocery store perspective. So while the bread gets at it, everyone is different. Really, what we look at from a bread perspective is there's a couple other things. I'm not going to read this chart to you, but trip mission is important. So your bread journey, if you're going out and buying like a fill up trip in the middle of the week, is very different than you're doing your kind of weekly stock up. So your trip mission is something very unique to grocery, and I have to understand that. Again, what triggers the decision? I need to understand what triggers the decision in the store. As I mentioned before, a big element of this study was it was done during COVID, and how does the dynamics of things being out of stock affect? If I was redoing this now, a big thing would be understanding the impact of inflation and rising prices. Do people look at prices? Do they compare against private label more now than they did, say, a year ago? So the trip mission actually can change as the environment changes. Again, the COVID environment and inflation environment may actually impact the trip mission, and we need to understand that. This is something we'll probably be replicating to understand kind of that inflationary rising prices impact. Just kind of a side note there, but for bread, we like to talk about bread. Consumers don't. They like to talk about sandwiches. And so a lot of our learning says is a big portion or opportunity within our trip missions is to talk about not the price of bread, but the affordability of a hamburger versus a steak, a sandwich versus a prepared meal. And then also comparing a sandwich in the home versus a sandwich out of home, where it's much more cost efficient to make that sandwich in home. So a lot of understanding this trip mission work will be really driving and affecting our not only out of store communications, but our in-store communications going forward. And again, another part of this is a lot of people tried new brands during COVID because, out of stocks were happening. Well, once someone new tries your brand, what are those key elements we need to communicate that keeps them into our brand, into our franchise? So as you can see here, kind of some of the learnings here, as I just mentioned, don't talk about bread, talk about the end product. Minimal availability. If I'm thinking about family friendly and Nature's Own, that makes it easier to come to mind, more apt to grab Nature's Own if I'm thinking about that family occasion. Likewise, if it's just, for kids, Wonder Bread. If it's more adult and healthier, I want them to immediately make that mental availability connection with healthiness and Dave's Killer Bread. And again, COVID was a great way of driving trial. How do we keep building off of that? Right now, what is the role of coupons and promotions in store, whether it's a coupon you go in with or it's a coupon you get at checkout, but understanding the role of what is actually happening in the store is a big element of the driver. So that is it. If you have questions, we'll talk about it next Monday. Apologize for getting probably this up a little later than people would like, but hopefully you found it useful. And again, something we'd love to talk about on Monday if you guys have questions. Thank you.